So it looks like we have everyone up here that's going to be talking today in regards to the questions that we've got. But yeah, like Ranger said, welcome everyone to Shade Protocol's first Twitter space. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about Shade culture and what it means for Shade to operate in a decentralized ecosystem. And some of the topics that we are going to talk about are the struggles that we've had, what do we like from other ecosystems, and more specifically Secret, just because we are an application built on top of Secret Network, and then a couple other just Cosmos related questions. But to kick us off, let me grab my list of questions really quick. So the first question is going to be directed towards Carter and Ranger. But how do you guys see Shade handling decentralization in an ecosystem? How do you guys see us operating? How do you guys see us handling communications and so forth?
Yeah, it's a pretty broad question. I think the biggest paradigm you immediately notice with these decentralized communities is inevitably the more people that get pulled into the vision, the more people you have at play that.
Carter, you got muted.
Oh, I got muted. Let's try that again. Oh, test. Are we good now?
You should be good.
Okay, sorry about that. But long story short, the more people you pull into the vision, the harder it is to organize, right? Just by like the law of entropy, right? Organizing 1,000 people versus organizing 10 people is automatically going to be a more difficult task. And then the more people there are, the more difficult it is to determine like who are the most competent people and capable of making like judgment calls on decisions for the protocol, or at least advocating for those decisions for the protocol. So, Ranger, I'd love your thoughts on like what does it mean in a decentralized community to find the most like competent individual? Because I feel like right now in blockchain, it's kind of like if you're there, then like it's 100% kind of like accepted, and that's like part of the decentralized ethos is like everyone kind of has a spot at the table, but there's advantages to this is all kind of tied to the thought of what does it mean to build out a decentralized ecosystem, and I think that's like one of the risks at play.
Yeah, I think it is tough because there's like in the real world, they put out a job description and they say like we want someone who has experience doing this in the past and or has this particular skill set. And I think in crypto, it's like everyone is educated or knows something, but I think that there's not a lot of like direct application. Like even like an economist for a crypto product may be a guy that in his day job or in his previous job didn't do economics but did accounting or something related. And so it's like it's hard to discount anyone because everyone is kind of learning. Like crypto's a new thing. I like to tell people if you want to learn crypto, you have to unlearn traditional finance a little bit. But when it comes to finding people, I think it's really like people need to be willing to give good thoughts in like public forums to stand out because like it is like kind of a marketplace of ideas. Like you're on a Telegram or you're on a forum and you just have a random username, so like how do you stand out from that perspective to be like this guy has good thoughts and we should bring him in. And then it's maybe less about background and more about what are you saying on a consistent basis and does it mesh with the project's culture, I guess, and ideology and skills that are needed.
Interesting. So it's definitely like a fine line between anyone can differentiate themselves on a public forum in a public space by like showing that showing competency, showing well thought out critical thinking. But then there is also this component of it, like there could be people that are like true professionals, that have that background experience that are going to be a higher level, and how much weight do you give to people that have those traditional backgrounds? Because like there's a tension there, right? Like you could talk to an economist that has no idea how to apply that to crypto, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, they might have like a deeper level of understanding than any of us will ever have access to, that are pseudo economists that have had to like figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it would be awesome if there was a way on chain to like somehow prove credentials. But you know, I think it's like it's funny because in a decentralized world, and like this is kind of why I've been like harping on culture a little bit, is like there's so many important questions to answer. It's like if someone comes in and they have that background, but before they lift a finger, they want to be paid, like is that person like aligned with the culture? Like in a decentralized, everyone's contributing to the bottom line. Everyone should be trying to pump their own bag because they're shade people. So I don't know. It's a difficult thing to account for.
Yeah, and I feel like the community I really look up to is like MakerDAO in terms of how they run their forums. And I would definitely say you're onto something about public forums being a place of differentiation. Um, just because it's like a forum is your chance to at length defend an idea or essentially like attack an idea. Um, and you can't really hide competency within like the context of a forum. I mean, like people can get away with it, but I think an emphasis on the most in-depth discussions being written is like a really good way for people to stand out. But I mean, there's trade-offs to every medium, right? Like you could have someone who's a really good speaker and good at like on the fly creatively thinking about things such as like a Twitter space that aren't as good as like on a public forum. So I don't know, like what does shade culture emphasize? You know, does it emphasize forums versus, you know, video medium versus Twitter space? Like these are all questions at large.
Yeah, and I guess to think about the like we were talking about like credentials, and if someone could prove that they were an economist to therefore work on the economist, like in this like pseudo anonymous world, you know, without doxing yourself, I mean that basically is your way to prove your understanding, is basically by just speaking publicly about things. So, but what does Shade want to emphasize? That's a tough question. It's like I don't know. I think that we want to emphasize having hard conversations. I think we want to emphasize transparency in the way that we're thinking and approaching topics. You know, you laid out a really good slider and trade-offs on the forums, which if you haven't been to the forums, you know, I would really suggest you check them out and give your opinion on what it should be as well.
Yeah, and I guess the observation is that every single community choice in terms of culture technically has trade-offs. Like you could have a community that they were just like absolutely brutal. Like there's no like sugarcoating anything. And there's like advantages to that, right? Like you really get down to things. The flip side is that like the delivery of that truth can sometimes keep people around, because some people don't react well to like stuff that's not sugarcoated, and those people still might be valuable contributors even though they don't react well to stuff that's not sugarcoated, right? And that's like an example of a trade-off of, I think that was emphasis on truth versus delivery of truth is like an interesting one. And I think we probably err more on the side of, from what I'm seeing from the community, my gut says that like emphasis on truth versus delivery seems to be like where the bias is.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely lean towards telling the truth and having the hard conversations. You don't want to start something with false assumptions, and you don't want to, you know, just put your head in the sand. Like if we're here for the next 10 years and we're trying to build something that's going to have billions of dollars inside of it, then like they might like, this is why I think culture is important. It's like it might seem like these are small decisions, but I feel like the landscape that we set for the community is ultimately what will make or break our success, you know? So.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. I think this is a great segue into our next question. Ranger, you specifically brought it up of Shade Protocols focused on transparency and having these hard conversations. So, what are these key principles that we're going to set for the community and for the culture? Are they things like transparency and more leaning towards just hard truth, whether or not it's sugar coated or delivered correctly? Like, what do you and Carter and Father Flash see these core principles being?
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of leads back to the decentralization a little bit as well. Like, you know, in a decentralized environment, you know, not everyone is ultimately going to be working on, you know, building the protocol, but that doesn't mean that people aren't invested and they want to understand what's going on. So, like, transparency, like things like this are very important. We need to give people a good amount of information to make decisions. And, you know, I think there should be a level of decorum to how you say things, but when I speak about like the emphasis of truth, I just mean that we shouldn't really like recreate a world where it's like, oh, this is a bull market problem, this is a bear market problem. It's like if we have issues, we should just fix them now before we build on top of them. And so that's really like the core thing that I would like to see from, you know, maybe the Shade community, and even like call any of us out. Like that's how we're gonna all get better. As we said, like everyone here is like educated, and but we're also like taking on new roles. It's a new industry, so like definitely voice any opinions that you have about how you think things should be, or if things are going um, somehow off the rails.
Yeah, and I think on the subject of transparency, I feel like transparency is kind of like a superpower in the sense that like if we're able to, you know, transparently walk through the problems that are being solved and we can do it out in the public for the entire community to see, it means like we're unlocking um, many more people to be able to think about the problem itself, right? So like an example of that is even like talking about bond issuance and shade swap and some of the structures. Like I'm pushing internally as much as we can and like as a group to try to have these conversations and discussions out in the open, because then the community actually gets to see problem solving happening in real time. And so my gut instinct says if you choose a path of less transparency, what is gained, because it's always a trade-off, right? Like being opaque versus being transparent, like there's actually trade-offs and something, there's pros and cons to both. But the more opaque you are about problem solving and about the risks, it's kind of like you're able to hide the potential like struggle and like what it means to overcome those problems or potential like incompetency, right? Versus if you're transparent, there's nothing to hide behind, right? Like it's just 100% right out there in the open. You have to stand by the decisions that are made, the discussions that have been had publicly on forums or out in the open or on Telegram. And I think that's the way to do it in a decentralized community. Like having leadership be extremely opaque, but then having like a decentralized community that feels like a bit of an oxymoron. That seems to be a tension there that's difficult to overcome. Father Flash, I'd love to get your thoughts on kind of that trade off of opaqueness versus transparency.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear what you're saying. I think transparency definitely is key for just like you brought up MakerDAO, right? Like any of these communities that are just flourishing, the decentralization really is tied to that, like that transparency. I think when people are able to see like the decision making process behind things, you know, it gives them a sense of like credibility. You know, it builds that ethos where now they feel comfortable, you know, investing their money into this financial service, right? This protocol, because they understand what the decisions are. They understand the thought processes. But I think just like on a bigger, you know, to answer your question, Dalton, about just like what are some of the key principles for Shade Protocol. Like, you got to think of this as like almost like values. Like, what do we value, right? As a protocol, as a community, what are we valuing? And I think we need to value all of our community members. And like, I know, Ranger. We spoke about this many times, but we need to make sure that community members are all acknowledged, and they feel comfortable where they are, and there's still discussion where people are, there's constructive criticism, yet people can walk away and feel, comfortable about what just went down. I think that this also ties into another thing of values is, one of the things that we should try and use as a principle is questioning assumptions. And I think as like a layer two, this is something that we inherit naturally, where many applications inherit, on all the different chains. So for example, like you look at pretty much anything outside of Secret Network, and these people would just overlook the assumption of privacy, right? That's an easy one. And I think us as Shade Protocol being built on Secret Network, we need to question the assumptions that come with Secret Network, and all these should be in a way where people can offer up their opinions, and also have them shot down, but they aren't feeling like they need to leave the protocol. So I think, yeah, Carter, for transparency, we need to have this communication, the status of communication be acknowledged across the community members and the core development.
Yeah, truthful, but polite at the same time. I don't think the truth has to be less of a truth if you say it politely. I think it's just a bit of an art form to pull off. It's probably one of the harder things to do, is to like completely and utterly disagree with someone, but do it completely politely. I'm actually gonna ask Dalton a question here on the topic of transparency. And excellent points, Father Flash, just in terms of, yeah, like 100% agree with everything that was said there. But I want to pose like a challenge question to Dalton. So we're talking about the subject of transparency. What does that tension look like when it comes to like product development and marketing? Because like in the world of Web3, like there's this paradigm where like anticipation and like building hype is like a very important part of like pulling in new users and getting people excited about products. And so how do you handle the tension between building anticipation for something that is to come, and how that conflicts with like transparency, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first part of that question is that we just have to acknowledge the space that we're in. We're not in a Web 2 space. Things move unbelievably quickly in the Web3 world, in the crypto world in general. And so it's a very fine line that, like you said, that's a balance between creating hype for a project and products that you're releasing versus holding some back, right? And kind of creating this mystery of like, oh, hey, what are they actually building? What's going on? Are they actually building things? Like, are they doing all right? Where's the project at? But that process is accelerated because we are in such a busy space of Web3. Usually in Web2, I guess just on a normal product cycle, like companies don't launch a handful of products in 1 year. If like they launch maybe one, maybe two if they're doing very, very well. But in the crypto world, like projects are just launching products left and right in regards to like handfuls of countless 3, 4, 5 products in 1 year. And there's a fine line between launching products, but launching products correctly, launching products in a succinct pattern that will lead to adoption, and launching products in a pattern that will lead to safety as well for users. Because you can launch 5 products in 1 year, but are they audited? Were they built correctly? Are they safe to use? There's all these questions that come into this process of your actual question of how do you balance in between like releasing products and building hype, or even announcing products that are coming later in the year versus not and holding back a little bit. I think we've done that pretty well for Shade. And the biggest part for Shade as well is that the ecosystem of DeFi applications only completely makes sense if you know about all the applications. And so that's been the hard balance for us, is we want people to understand that there are more and more products than they think that are coming that will create this ecosystem that you actually don't have to leave. You could hold Shade and do completely everything you've ever wanted to do in decentralized finance. But we can't I guess we can't put all of our eggs in one basket and just tell you everything we're going to do, right? Because you would just kind of see it and you'd go, yeah, all right, cool, like we'll believe it when we see it. And so the way you kind of balance that is, hey, you release one product, you prove yourself, right? You make sure that the community is able to use said product that you've released and that it's safe and that it's sound. And then you move on to the next product and say, hey, remember that we did this. Remember that we airdropped the token to you. It was very smooth. Our engineering team actually integrated a wallet that no one else has been able to do to date with Terra. And now we're going to be building all of these new things that will allow you to do more and more. And so it's there's not really a right answer. It's a very fine line between making sure people understand that there is more, but that they can't exactly know it yet because it'll give up the whole secret. I do see that Father Flash requested, so maybe he had to jump off and jump back on, but I'm going to add him here.
Yeah, it's an interesting tension of like, there's many products at play, and if it was just like imagine you open sourced a white paper as it was being written, it'd be pretty chaotic. So like, I guess what I'm trying to point out here is that one of the advantages of like, at least with product development, of not necessarily being quote unquote like 1,000% transparent, is that like you're able to deliver the storytelling and the products in a much more cohesive way. Like once they've reached like its proper stage, like it's matured to the correct point in time. But I guess I just wanted to pose that challenging question to point out that like product releases aren't totally transparent in the sense that like if someone comes up with a product idea and like they don't necessarily immediately shout it to the community. It's like, whoa, we gotta formulate this. We gotta turn this into something mature. We gotta see if this is something that can be developed. And like, yeah, I just wanted to point out the tension there. I think you answered that super well.
Yeah, and I mean it's a trade-off again, right? In terms of transparency, and can you be fully transparent on product? Probably not. But can you be fully transparent on grants and funding like that? Yeah, more than likely. There's things that you can be fully transparent on, and things that you probably shouldn't be, just for the sake of being more successful than not. And so again, it comes to trade-offs and making sure that like everything is kind of functioning correctly. But yeah, no, very, very solid question. Thank you for that. So the next question we have is, what things do we like about our current ecosystem that we would like to inherit and see pushed forward for Shade? So I think Ranger's probably best suited to answer this first, and then Carter, and then Father Flash, if you want to add anything as well.
I mean, what do we like about the current culture? I mean, I think that right now we have a lot of people that want to contribute, which, I don't hang out in many other communities, some other IBC ones, but it seems like Secret has a lot of doers inside of it. So I think that that's very positive. Yeah. Are we supposed to say negative? No, because
yeah, we can do negatives. We can do positives and negatives.
Yeah, let's do positives and negatives. Let's focus on positives first, and then we'll swing back around and do a couple negatives as well.
I mean, I think that one other thing that's really great about the Secret community is it came from, Enigma, which was launched in 2017. So there's a lot of very old school crypto people here, like Monero and Bitcoin and early Bitcoin investors and things like that. So to me, the community is filled with veterans, and so there's a lot of knowledge in and around this this community, and so that's definitely another big positive, I think.
Yeah, let
Yeah.
me maybe rephrase the question and not focus so much on Secret Network itself. I focused on Secret Network just because we are built on top, but maybe let's open it up to just the Cosmos in general. Like, what are things that we like from other communities that we would like to see Shade inherit? So that includes Osmosis, that includes Juno, that includes everyone kind of involved.
Interesting. I would say my gut instinct, sorry to jump in there, Ranger, is like the excitement about what can be unlocked with the internet of blockchains, right? Which is like it's like a very broad thing, but like the one thing that like you can talk to someone who's an Osmosis Maxi or a Juno Maxi or Secret Network Maxi, and like the one thing everyone is united on is like what happens when one blockchain can talk to another? What happens when like assets can move fluidly from one chain to another? And so like what does that really boil down to as like an attribute? It's curiosity, right? It's curiosity about what interoperability can unlock. And so I would really hope that like as a community we foster a consistent curiosity about like what Shade Protocol can pull off, what it's capable of, what it can do, that we continue to dream up better and better economic systems, better and better governance models, better and better products. Yeah, curiosity. I think that's what unites the Cosmos, like at its heart.
Yeah, absolutely. Ranger, do you have anything else from other ecosystems or Father Flash as well?
Yeah, I could definitely jump in here. I would say that, yeah, along the lines of curiosity. But I think one of the most important, right? If you came across Shade Protocol, you probably found it, Secret Network, and you realize that privacy is, essential for the, mass adoption of Web3. And I think that that's like a really beautiful, like character trait that most people in not even just the Cosmos, but like Secret Network in general, I guess in the Cosmos as well, what it really is boils down to is we understand what it takes to plan for mass adoption. And one, you got to realize that interoperability is, key, but privacy is key. So I think those two are probably one of my favorite things that most community members, when they're in the ecosystem, they realize and they always push forward with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think all of us here just fully believe that privacy is the only way moving forward. But okay, let's transfer to the negatives, and let's do this in a way that, like Carter and Ranger spoke about, is polite but truthful. So what are some negatives from some ecosystems, not specifically Secret if that's what it is, but that you wouldn't want to see Shade adopt, or that you'd be wary of walking forward with?
I think a lot of cultural problems emerge when there's a divergence in incentives, where like a subset of individuals' short-term incentives are stronger than like the long-term health of the protocol and the community. So where do you start to see those short-term like divergences in incentives start to emerge? I think a lot of times it has to do with capital allocation from protocols. And so like the really obvious one that everyone in the Cosmos can look at pretty easily is like validators, right? It's like this interesting subset of individuals that have their own economic incentives, but then they're also all united under like making sure that the protocol that they all are making, right? Because it's a network of nodes, succeeds as well. And I think like within Cosmos and Juno and Osmosis, like we do see these interesting, we got like the Prop 72, Prop 16, like all these things emerge. And like ultimately the great debate is people talking about like long-term incentives for the protocol and the long-term impact versus short-term impact. And I think culturally, sometimes there's negatives when people are too long-term focused or too short-term focused. And so it's a dance, there's no like one right way to navigate it. But I do think if you had a community that was really, really biased towards a decade-long vision, right? Like if you're able to get rid of like the short-term blinders, even though sometimes that is important, but if you could have a community operate with that super long-term vision, like that would be a superpower for a community to have. But once again, this goes back to what I said earlier, bag holders and token holders, many of them are operating under a short-term lens, right? Not a decade-long vision. And that automatically creates a cultural friction within your community. And so I don't know like how you necessarily can build that economically, but I do know that like culturally, from a leadership level, from a community contributor standpoint, if we can keep the discussion focused on that decade-long vision, then I think we're going to be able to sidestep some of the negatives we've seen from certain Cosmos communities. And once again, it's not even a knock on those communities. Like it seems like such a very natural problem to emerge out of the entropy that is diverging economic incentives. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Ranger or Father Flash, do you guys have anything to add, like things that you just don't want to see adopted into the shade ecosystem at all?
Well, I could be mistaken, but I just feel like many other ecosystems in my mind have like very organic, demand to like tweet and just engage. And you know, I was been speaking with some of the original lunatics, trying to unlock kind of like how did they come together in such a powerful way. They basically told me that it was all kind of organic, based around like the vision aligned of like decentralized blockchains require decentralized money. And so I guess I would like to see our community kind of be more organically engaged, if that's the polite way to say. So yeah, I mean that's a big one for me.
Yeah, and part of that is like needing to make sure that the vision is unified, which I think right now the tagline is private, global, stable, but that speaks to like Silk's mission. What's Shade Protocol's vision, right? Well, it's an array of connected DeFi privacy preserving applications, but that's not necessarily as succinct as decentralized blockchain needs decentralized money. So there's a challenge problem for anyone listening to this. If like what is the rallying cry for Shade Protocol? Privacy for DeFi? That's definitely a very succinct way of putting it. But maybe there's something else. Maybe there's a different phrase and story that we can that probably is going to be very, very close to that. But yeah, it's interesting. Decentralized blockchain needs decentralized money, and a community rallied behind that vision organically. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'll hop in here as well. Like with that, I would say that one of the things I don't want to see in Shade Protocol, which I don't think we'll get to this point, but it's that idea, like Ranger, you brought up, the Terra ecosystem. So many people have flocked over to there, pretty much because of Anchor, right? They're looking for that high APY, and they want to jump on that, and that's great. Yeah, no problem. But the issue is that we need people to focus on sustainability, right? Like you're talking about a protocol that we are envisioning is going to have billions of dollars. And the number one thing that people need is sustainability. They want to make sure that their money that's in there is not going to go anywhere. And, that's the beauty of, decentralized money, is you could do more with your money than you would be able to traditionally. And as long as you can do that and you have privacy baked in, which, pretty much for anybody coming on, they're not even going to need to even, in the future, they're not even going to need to worry about that, right? That should just be not even a thought, right? Privacy should just be baked in. But sustainability, of course, needs to be there. So to answer your question, Carter, to kind of piggyback off that, we need to create. Shade Protocol needs to be planned now for mass adoption. I know I said this before, but we need to have it so that the user experience is as seamless as possible, so they could go and interact with this decentralized money not be worried about losing their money, not be worried about prying eyes on their money or on their data in general. And they won't have to worry about hopping from this blockchain to another blockchain to go find some protocol with a different coin or token. And instead, they could just stay where they are and do everything they need to do without having to worry. So, I guess the user experience, the easy user experience, is something that I would say a lot of people in the DeFi space have not been doing, and that's something that I want to see, flourish with Shade Protocol.
It's so interesting to me how like the attributes of the product also become attributes of the community. Like they're like so interwoven into each other, right? Because like that the question started with like what's like culture in Cosmos that like we appreciate or don't appreciate, and like it's really intriguing to see how like answers like like sustainable economics and like a long-term focus, like so much of that is product focus. I think Ranger, your answer was a very like purely culture answer about like organic community engagement, versus me and Father's Flash's answers were more like about product that is tied to like community's view of like what they're participating in. I don't know. I find that really fascinating. They're all great components, right? Organic engagement, sustainability, and a long-term focus. Those all are cultural values, but some of them are really intimately tied to the product design too, which is cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, I mean, and I guess that resonates with like the points that the lunatics were kind of making, was like the vision of the product was ultimately what drove the organic engagement, coupled with recognizing people who are organically engaging from the largest accounts that Shade has, which is maybe like the main account, I don't know who else would fall in that category, but like I think that yeah, it all does tie together. So
Dalton, do you have an answer for this one? I'd be curious on your standpoint of any community attribute that you think's not so great in the Cosmos that you'd like to see different on Shade Protocol. And by Cosmos, it's any Cosmos blockchain, of course. But.
Yeah, so for something, I'll start with something positive, and then I'll say something slightly negative, and then I'll say something positive again. So I agree with Ranger that for Secret Ecosystem specifically, the amount of veterans that we have in regards to the crypto industry as a whole is in the knowledge base that is in Secret is unbelievable, and I think it's an kind of untapped potential just in terms of the Cosmos ecosystem in general. I think there's so much to be learned from everyone in the Secret ecosystem, and that goes for every project in the Cosmos. I am biased, of course, just because I've interacted the most with people in the Secret network, but I think it's an untapped potential. Just all of the knowledge that is in Secret. From all of these people that are excited to be building, that are excited to be doing all of these new things. Something negative I see is the not the inability, but the lack of educating your neighbor in a sense. If someone doesn't fully understand a product, or someone doesn't fully agree with something and potentially has a different idea, it's not really an ecosystem specific thing. I have noticed that there are times where someone does something like that, and the immediate reaction isn't to ask why they think that. Why are they perceiving it that way? What can we have a conversation? It's more so to jump them in a sense and go, well, you're stupid, you're dumb, you don't understand this. Obviously, like, you never will. And it's unfortunate. I'd really love to see people be more inclusive in that sense of education, of asking questions and asking people, hey, like, I understand that you think that way. Why do you think that way? Have you thought about it this way? Like, let's walk through why this system is the way it is and why it was built this way. And so maybe either you'll understand it, or if at the end you still don't agree with it, at least we've had said conversation. I'd really like to see more of that, and not so much the attacking and kind of like, well, you just don't understand it, like, you'll never understand it, just move on. And then for another positive, I do agree with Father Flash in terms of sustainability being one of the most important things that we can build for. both on like a product side, like Carter, you were talking about, like it's very, very intimately tied with sustainability long term in the market is also tied with sustainability of like the product and how well it's built and how solid it functions. But sustainability as well for the community, right? Like sustainability just doesn't happen. You have to have this culture built, and you have to have this inclusivity built for anyone that wants to come in and wants to function in the ecosystem. They're able to, and they're allowed to, and they're actually encouraged to, right? There's not this like huge wall of something that you have to jump over to get into this ecosystem, or like to be adopted into it, or to be involved in the community. Like that is one of my bigger things. And obviously I'm a little bit biased as well, because I do work on the marketing side / community side of things. But one of my bigger sustainability things is, yes, product absolutely has to be like 100% solid for long-term sustainability. But you also have to, Carter, and I think you agree with me on this, you also have to empower community members, and you have to empower not just protocol like members, but just regular everyday members of the community to step up and take accountability to create a sustainable ecosystem that everyone is able to function in, and that new people are allowed to come into, grow in, and then take those positions of leadership later on, once they've been around for a while. And that ties in again to my ask of the education piece, because if you can do those things, you also lend it yourself to educating people, right? And that just builds a long-term sustainable vision for the protocol. And I think that's what we're all here for, is like the 10+ year vision. But yeah, those are some things that I noticed from being in this space.
I love the idea of like, it's essentially like open arms, right? It's like, hey, this person, they don't get Shade Protocol or they don't get Secret Network. And so instead of, I think the word you use is, instead of like jumping them, instead it's like a dialogue. It's like a, hey, like that's really interesting that you think that. Like let's talk. Like where'd you get your information on Secret Network? Here's like what are some of your questions at large that would make you change your mind about Secret Network? And like those types of discussions versus just outright being like, wow, you really don't understand this project, like da 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 da. Like, and that goes back to kind of the being polite, but also willing to like troubleshoot and problem solve disparities in knowledge with, whether it be a veteran in the cosmos that's already made up their mind, or someone that's just installed Kepler. One really interesting tension point, I know you brought up the idea of like empowering community members, and I think capital always becomes like a really controversial topic in like communities, right? Because the dream is that you could be empowered via capital to like work on a protocol or contribute to a protocol. And I think to Ranger's point, that ends up introducing some like really interesting incentive problems potentially. And maybe it's a different Twitter space where we like sit down and like troubleshoot that out in the open and like really walk through what some of those problems are. But I guess one thing I'll say is, one of my gut instincts is that DeFi protocols have yet to solve for the social layer. And by social layer, I mean, what does it mean to create a community that hangs out, spends time together, enjoys like just being humans together under the banner of something like Shade Protocol, without it having to be 100% focused like on the product? And like some people would say, hey, that's an unreasonable concept, right? Like everyone's invested, and therefore like the only unifying factor is like the product. But I think like we should aspire for more. Like what would it mean to make like a social layer tied to a DeFi protocol that is like truly passionate about not just the product but the people, right? Because if we can have people be passionate about people and excited about community, that is when you've created something that is resilient, right? And I think Ranger was alluding to this earlier, that Secret Network has a lot of veterans and people that have been around since a really long time. And the question is, have they stuck around because of the product, or have they stuck around because of the people? And the answer is, it's a combination of both. And because it's a combination of both, if you're a DeFi protocol that's not focused on building out a robust social layer, then you're missing a key component of what it means to build a resilient community. and we want to build a resilient community. So that's probably deserves its own own separate talk of like what it means to build out a social layer. And there's probably trade-offs to pursuing building out a social layer. But anyways, just some thoughts.
Yeah, I think maybe next Twitter Space, right? That I think that fully deserves that it's its own little sit down and conversation, yeah, about what it actually means to build out a sustainable social layer. Moving more towards the Cosmos as a whole, like obviously with announcements like Dydex coming, right? They're building their own L1 and bringing Dydex Exchange to the Cosmos. Things like Juno, launching Ultra Stable, their USD backed stablecoin. Like, what are some things that you guys are excited for in the Cosmos that you're looking forward to? Projects, like people announcements, like anything that you guys are looking forward to.
Well, I like the NFT aspect of crypto too, because like Carter was talking about the social layer, and I feel like that is really where it comes. And so my favorite is like Strange Clan, and they've been releasing game footage, and so I'm pretty excited to see more of that. But I think that it's like they have a year or two of development work left. But yeah, Strange Clan is minting soon, so their second town if you care. But yeah, I mean that's one of my favorite non-secret related projects.
There's this PFP project. I think it's called Anons. Don't know if you've heard of it. I would say I'm really excited for Comdex and IST, specifically IST, just because I think like I'm like really excited to see what happens when you put some of like the best Cosmos builders and thinkers into a room designing a stable coin. Like I'm just really pumped to like read through the white paper, the documentation, and like see everything completely fleshed out. I think there's like so much potential for that, and excited to see a whole ecosystem of stable coins emerge. I think Austin tweeted out earlier, which he's on the Twitter space, about how like the vision for stable coins is not like, and I think CryptoCito also tweeted this out too. It's like it's not one stable coin to rule them all. It's like we're building out a decentralized, resilient ecosystem of stable coins, and Silk is going to be one of them. And the cool part about Shade Protocol is Shade Protocol is more than just Silk, right? That's the tipping point once people realize that little like asterisk there. But anyways, in summary, Comdex, IST, those are my two favorite Cosmos projects right now that I'm like watching.
Yeah, and I'll say it on my end. I think Kujira, the team Kujira, just announced their decentralized, order book style exchange. So keep my eyes on that. It's good to see them rebounding from what they been doing with the Terra ecosystem, but definitely interesting to see.
Yeah, I think those are all really, really big projects that are being developed in the Cosmos. I know I was on a call with Father Flash earlier today. He has a DeFi Kingdoms T-shirt on, so I'm surprised he didn't mention that. But maybe he just picked that up from Decentral Austin. I don't know.
Called out.
Yeah, you gotta change now.
Dalton, do we want to open for Q&A for the final 7 minutes?
Yeah, I was gonna say for the final 5 to 7 minutes here, let's do some Q&A. We'll bring some people up. They can ask questions. I know there's some community members in here. There's some people that I haven't seen around before. So yeah, if you have a question for us, raise your hand in the space here, and we'll bring you up. And let's keep it brief, right? We're gonna try and move through a couple people here. We got about 5 minutes or so. So. You should be brought up. You should be good to go. Welcome.
My voice is a bit broken. I'm sick. Hi, everyone. I wanted to. There's a concept I recently discovered I didn't know about called agorism by Samuel Konkick, and I was watching an introduction to it yesterday, and he's just talking about the price of money versus store of value, and price of money being a basket of commodities, correlated to a basket of commodities, and then that's collateralized by the value, store value, whether if it's like Atom or something. I was wondering if there's something you guys also thought about that could sort of live beside silk, like let's call it silk with a C, C for commodities, where it'll live alongside the fiat version of silk. As cryptocurrency, we're kind of anti-fiat, so maybe another stable coin that's based off commodities. I don't know. It's just something I was thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome idea. There's definitely thoughts about like what would it mean for like Silk, this base stablecoin, to back other stablecoins, or what would it mean to launch other stablecoins after Silk has reached like a certain degree of adoption. So definitely keeping our eyes on ideas like a commodity focused stablecoin. I can't say it's on the current like immediate roadmap. I think partially because like you launch too many stable coins at once and that can be confusing from like an adoption standpoint. So it's like we're keeping the narrative laser focused on Silk. It's already differentiated enough because of its attributes that we don't want to dilute that story and that adoption curve. But over time, I think there's definitely room for future experimentation.
I would
Okay,
also
great.
say long term, the basket which makes up Silk could include commodities as Oracle solutions become available. So right now, we have gold and Bitcoin as like non-fiat currencies, but in the future we could add small weights to other commodities as well.
Great. And in terms of the community thing, not trying to go back on this algorithm thing, but I mean, the idea of, I mean, where this all started from, right? A complete free market. So I think that's what everybody's also trying to get to without the, state control and whatnot. So isn't that one stem of what the community ethos would be, or are we talking about some other level of, community-based? Yeah.
Ooh, that's a fascinating question. I think I don't know if that's fully emerged yet, to be honest. I think Silk as a stablecoin name implies a lot, right? Like anyone who has a background in being like a privacy advocate, free market advocate, like that name alone is already like an interesting name. I think in terms of like community values, I haven't necessarily seen that side of the discussion be talked about as much. I think that identity is baked into Silk as a stablecoin. I haven't necessarily seen that baked into like community discussions as much as you might think. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I would encourage you if those are your values as a community member of Shade Protocol, I would encourage you to have those discussions on the Discord and Telegram and like see how people react, because I think a lot of that alignment might be unspoken. But yeah, does that make sense? Like let's talk about it. Like I think it's fascinating. I just haven't seen a lot of it.
Yeah, it's because the reason I bring it up is because the reason I actually gravitated towards Shade Protocol is because of this idea of trying to separate myself completely from a state of control and just be completely so like a sovereign state, basically,
Right. Yep. A private global stablecoin. Yeah. That's yep.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Em. I know personally I would love to have that conversation. I know most of the people that are core protocol members know my personal stances. But yeah, let's have those conversations in the Discord. I see Melch requested. Let's bring him up here really quick. Melch, you're on, man.
Here, I was thinking you guys were talking about sustainability, kind of that 10-year vision. I'm curious, in my own head, I think, how do you keep those people that have been around since like day one for those 10 years, how do you keep them from kind of converting to, hey, I've got a big bag of shade, now I'm incentivized to act that way, instead of maybe how they started off as, protocol backed and now kind of have gone to the dark side, maybe, for lack of a better word. How do you prevent that kind of conversion from happening now that they've been there for a long time?
That's fascinating. I would say there's two different effects at play there. There is the idea that there's like a centralization of wealth around certain stakeholders that have been around for a long time, and that can elicit a certain type of behavior. And then there's also the behavior that emerges from someone who simply has like put X amount of time into the community and the protocol, right? So like one of them has to do with the wealth, one of them has to do with the time invested. It's really interesting too, because wealth technically is a representation of time. So they both probably produce similar outcomes, but probably slightly different behaviors, if that makes sense. How do you reduce that effect over the long haul? Dang, Melch, that's a really hard question. I don't know, man. I have no idea. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer myself, which is why it came to mind, but I think it's almost like human nature, and you can see it in cultures and groups that have been around for a long time, right? So as me being somebody early, that's kind of what I think of. How do you keep that natural flow instead of maybe seeing like some of the other communities that have kind of gone over, and you see people transition a little bit. So it's a tough one, but
One answer might be that like, and this is really hard because this depends on like character and people like having their heart be in a certain place. But I think people that like you could give, right? You create a culture of like we celebrate giving and spreading the love, so to speak. I think Vitalik is one of the coolest examples of someone that's just has massive amount of wealth and has like redistributed it in certain situations. And I don't know, can you foster that type of like nonprofit give back to the community mentality? I think it's possible, but like there has to be an intentionality there that's thought about from day one. So someone's got to write that down and something to solve. Like how do we put it on people's hearts in our community that like when you reach a certain level and you're very early, your gut reaction is not to hoard but to give, and that's a really tough character trait to elicit, as you said, human nature.
yeah, I like that. It's one thing that drew me to you guys. I think if a culture can make sure that they don't get that like inner circle cool kids group, that now is incentivized to be exclusive. Don't let people in unless you're, closed off cool kid kind of mentality. I think that you guys do a good job of that already. So I know that that's just in my opinion what's attracting me to you guys. So I think if that can be carried on through that 10-year plan, man, you've got a powerhouse that's going to go a far way.
Melch asking the absolute hard hitters. Appreciate it. Melch has been around since damn near day one. But let's do one more here, and then we will probably have to jump off. I know most of us have meetings, but yeah, let's do one more question if anybody wants to raise their hand. Otherwise, we will jump off. All right. I'm not seeing anybody raise their hands. So I would say let's call it Carter, Father Flash. I think Ranger had to already jump off, but thank you guys for jumping on. Thank you guys for having this conversation. Thank you everyone for listening. I know it was our first space, but there's a pretty good turnout. Let's these happen every week, Wednesdays at 11 a.m. CT. So make sure to mark it in your calendar, and we will see all of you guys next week. All right. Bye, everybody.
Have a wonderful day, guys.
Take care, everyone.